Freedom isn't a color, though it could arguably be red, white, and blue. Freedom isn't a fad or a place, even though my ancestors ran to freedom. Freedom is the state of being free or at liberty, exempt from external control, the power to determine one's actions without restraint, political and personal independence, not subject to despotism, ease of movement. To be able to own a gun is a symbol of one freedom. Being able to legally own a gun means that you are an adult, free. You are no longer under daddy's or mama's rules. Free. It usually means you have no domestic violence, felony, or drug convictions. You have not been incarcerated. You are law-abiding. Free. It means you can pass a background check. Free. It means you are able to vote. Free. It means you are a citizen of the community. You don't have to check in with your parole officer. You can go where you want to. You are free. I didn't grow up during the time of institutionalized slavery, but I learned from my history that slaves cannot own guns. I am free. If you have the power to determine your own actions without restraint, you are free. Gun ownership is more than hunting or collecting, competition or recreational shooting, or even self-defense. It means you are not dependent on the government for your safety. Free. It means you rely on your own strength, wit, and ability. It is what separates this country from so many others. Here, you are free. You're not dependent on a master, the king, or a queen, a religious leader. You are an authority of yourself. You are not controlled. You are free. Right now across America at gun shows, federally licensed firearms dealers and firearms enthusiasts are active. You see, the drum is beating. The tripwire on the perimeter of freedom for the law-abiding gun owner has been crossed. The alarm has been sounded. So what's the big deal? Why are the natives so restless? Well, see, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. The vigilant have seen the gathering of personalities that believe our freedom is too broad. The awake and the conscious gun owner is watching the assembling of forces of despotism and political power contrary to the ideas of the founding of this country. Those that see Handgun Control Incorporated, the Brady campaign against gun owners, and even the United Nations marshaling forces to force Big Brother, socialism, one world, and we know better than you elite, singing Kumbaya and creating ways to take away our rights hidden behind sound bites. They're stripping us instead of whipping us. They're using misinformed and uneducated, the victims of violence, the afraid and the cowardly, and even the scared. Almost 150 years ago, fear of African insurrection and Native American payback, guns were regulated. Made so expensive, so only some people could afford them. Almost 100 years ago, gun control was enforced by men in white hoods against black, brown, yellow, and Hebrew people in the form of domestic terrorism. Almost 75 years ago, gun control was pushed to the limit. Certain types of guns for certain types of people, all in the name of public safety. Then, Italian immigrants, World War veterans, and the migration of field hands from the South were challenging the status quo. Almost 50 years ago, gun control, through politics and persuasion, evolved as propaganda for nation witnessing televised violence on a global scale in Korea, Vietnam, the civil rights struggle here, and the assassination of our beloved figures. 8 years ago, the average Joe in America was introduced to an old term, terrorism. That word denies freedom. It oppresses with fear. It is used to manipulate and scare the weak into seeking help from outside sources and not independence. We now stand a proud and weary nation, proud that we have collectively elected the first president of color in the history of the United States. But we're also tired of fighting racial, spiritual, and ideological wars. But in every decade, every skirmish, every misstep in America's history, there's always arose a minority that opposed the rich, the affluent, and the wrong to fight for what is right. If it weren't for the Underground Railroad and white men and women that knew that institutionalized slavery was wrong, nothing would have changed. If it weren't for men and women that started the Niagara movement, a small number of clergy and people that risked death, nothing would have changed. After the dogs, the water hoses, the imprisonments, the lynch mobs, and the murder, if it weren't for the continued struggle of those that believed in the right of all people, Martin, Medgar, John, Robert, and Malcolm would have died for nothing. But now, let every gunshot remind you that you are an American. Let every round you load and fire remind you that this is a product of freedom. This is why you fight. This is why you don't let some smooth-talking politician go when he or she suggests that you don't need this or that. This is why you write to your congressperson and say no to this and no to that, because freedom matters to you. This is why you support those that support your rights. This is why you are skeptical of feel-good laws that are big on emotions but small in problem solving. This is why we fight for the right to keep and bear arms. Don't let the times fool you or lull you into thinking that today is different than it was 150 years ago. People haven't evolved. There is still crime, terrorism, greed, poverty, and the isms, alcohol, drug, addictions, etc., that seek to take away your freedom. Yeah, they're smarter now, the gun grabbers. They seek to divide and conquer. They will pit the hunters against collectors of military-style arms. They will convince you that they're not taking away your rights, but protecting you from yourself. You know, repeating a lie many times does not make it true. So, here I stand to inspire and remind you that freedom isn't free. Some paid for what we can enjoy with blood. Don't give it away. Apathy is unacceptable. Now is the time to get involved. Now is the time to lend a hand. Now is the time to protect and serve your nation by first protecting and serving your community, your household, and our way of life from all enemies of this freedom, foreign and domestic. There is no compromise in right or wrong. There is no second place in a gunfight. If you want to protect the children, protect their future from those that seek to take away your right today. If you want to stop the violence, stop the violent. If you want to increase the peace, prepare for war. You and I, my fellow citizens, need to be strong in our faith that all nations under God will reach the goal of peace with justice. May we be ever unswerving in devotion to principle, confident but humble with power, diligent in pursuit of the nation's great goals. And that was from President Eisenhower. I've been given the opportunity to talk to you one-on-one. Take what you need and share what you don't. President Abraham Lincoln said, "The shepherd drives the wolf from the sheep's throat, for which the sheep thanks the shepherd as his liberator, while the wolf denounces him for the same act as the destroyer of liberty." Plainly, the sheep and the wolf are not agreed upon a definition of the word liberty, and precisely the same difference prevails today among human creatures. I bet you're saying, wow, all that from a preacher. But you see, Martin Luther said, a preacher must both be soldier and shepherd. He must nourish, defend, and teach. He must have teeth in his mouth and be able to bite and fight. You are the shepherds and the caretakers of freedom. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.